Et salut tout le monde, aujourd'hui je reçois Jon de Hyperlane. How are you, Jon?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm really happy. Tell us a bit about you, like what you did in the past and what brings you to Hyperlane.
So I guess I've been in crypto now for close to 8 years.
Mhm.
Before I got into crypto full time, I was at Morgan Stanley on
Oh,
a bond trading desk, and that was it was a fun time. And early on into my time there, a friend asked me like, "Hey, what do you think? I'm thinking of putting like all my money into Ethereum." And this was like the spring, summer of 2016. And like he's asking me this because I work for a financial firm. I like help people
Mm.
build, bond portfolios, and he's like asking me for like money advice. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know enough about it. I don't know if it's a good idea. I don't know if it's a bad idea. Like, let's look into it. And that was like a
Mm.
Saturday afternoon, and we spend the next couple of days just like diving super deep into it. I'm like, well, if I need to make a big invest, here's like what I do with my clients. We like get really smart, and I
Mm.
come back to work Monday morning, and I am like, it's like my mind's been taken over. It's kind of like I've been bitten by some crypto vampire, and like I turn into a crypto vampire myself. It's like all I could think about. And like I come into work that morning, and I'm like, guys, you have no idea what I just learned over this weekend. You have to think about this. I have to tell you all about it. They're like, what is it? And I'm like, at the time I'm like one of the younger guys on the trading desk. I'm like, we are all so worried about the trading bots taking our jobs, because this was like 2016. A big story on that trading desk was
Mhm.
like, well, um, there's going to be automation, and like we were doing some pretty obscure bonds, like it's called municipal bonds. So these are like the bonds of like local cities and states and schools and all that. And so
Mhm.
it was probably the place where automation would happen last in financial markets. But we all knew it was coming, and everyone was worried about it. Like the 40 and 50-year-olds on the trading desk. This is like they called it the auto bidder. That was like the big concern. And I'm like, don't worry about the auto bidder. The auto bidder is not going to matter. What's really going to matter, this thing Ethereum. That's what's going to take away everyone's jobs here. And like we all have to like get really, really smart about it. And they're like, okay, yeah, sure, kid. But from that moment on, that was it. Like it's all I could think
Mm.
about. And like 6 something months later, beginning of 2017, like you get it's bonus season, like around February, bankers and like investment banks distribute their bonuses. And I'm like, all right, now it's time to make my move. I'm gonna get into
Mm.
crypto big time. And I don't come from like a wealthy family. This was the first time that I wasn't poor like my entire life getting that job. And so I needed to find like a risk averse way to get into crypto. And I was like, what's like a crypto bond? Well, mining, because I'm gonna put this big investment into the equipment, and
Mm.
then I will like get these regular distributions of like cash flows through the crypto that I mine. So I became a miner first of Ethereum and later of Zcash. And
Mm.
that was it. Like I spent the rest of 2017 just getting deeper and deeper and deeper into crypto, and like took every meeting, every connection I could take. I kind of become like the laughing stock of my trading group. Everyone's like, that guy's into crypto. He's such a and end of the year, one of their big clients, one of their big longtime hedge fund clients, was like, well, we're opening up a crypto fund. And someone there recommended that I speak to them. Told them, hey, we have a guy on our desk who like is super into crypto. You should talk to him. And
Mm.
then a few weeks later, I joined that firm. So that firm is called Passport Capital, and I
Mhm.
like was their first hire for this new crypto fund. And that's how like my professional crypto journey started, and I've been in the industry ever since.
That's crazy. Wow.
Yeah, I mean it's a crazy,
2016.
like it was a totally wild time, and like I wouldn't change it for the world. It was like the best thing that ever happened to me.
Awesome. So that makes sense about Hyperlane because you're kind of helping the new roadmap of Ethereum. You're still close to Ethereum, right?
Very,
Yeah.
but basically everything we do is kind of like a kind of a sort of taking it into our own hands insofar as like helping the broader Ethereum roadmap like come into fruition. Um,
Mm.
I kind of had like so take you back to that weekend, right, where I'm like finding out about this stuff, and I'm like, this is the coolest shit in the world. Why is it the coolest shit in the world? Because they're basically telling us that they're going to build like these permissionless servers on the internet, these blockchains. Anyone's going to be able to do whatever the hell they want with them. And that just sounded so fucking cool. And specifically, like this idea of financial services, that anyone could just like dispense those. Because, you know, like for me, so I grew up in Israel, and the banks in Israel are some of the worst, you know, institutions in the world to deal with, and like in any developed nation. They have like 400 types of commissions. They treat you like shit. They almost like, we're doing you a favor that you can use us. Like, once your money is here, it's our money, and sometimes we let you have it. And, you know, I had many bad run-ins with them, like some really nasty, unpleasant stuff. And so I always really, really disliked the banks. And that's the main reason I got into finance, was like, I want to learn everything I can about like this system. And then I'll like accumulate enough knowledge and influence, and I'll do something about it. I'll be able to change it. And it was like this, you know, lofty kind of thing. And then I hear about this Ethereum thing, and you're like, shit, this might actually achieve what I want. This might actually like offer a real alternative to these banks. So I got to go head first into it. But you find out, okay, internet computers. And then the next thing you find out, oh yeah, they're not going to be able to talk to each other. And so that sounded a little bit strange, but, you know, I'm like, all right, cool. Like, you know, at first different ISPs couldn't, like, you know, the internet kind of started as like these closed off, you know, intranets. And then we had more of an internet, but you were kind of like limited to what your internet service provider would let you see. But, you know, I don't know, I remember getting an internet connection in 1996, and within a year, like, all of us, regardless of who your ISP was, we could just like see the same stuff. So it was really the same for blockchains. But then 2017, 18, 19, every year keeps rolling around, and it was still like an open problem. You know, it kind of hit me like, wait a second. You know, these things, these internet computers, like, what makes them so cool is they like, you know, they make the resources, like they make digital resources scarce. And so they kind of like put a fixed supply. You know, there's only so much space in a block. So if a block is like a bus, there's only so many seats. Well, okay, so like, let's say all of us are going to be really successful in convincing the world that they should use these systems. Well, there's going to be a problem. There's only so many seats on the bus. And, you know, you got to see it firsthand in 2017 with CryptoKitties. And then again in 2020, late 2020, and most of 2021, were like, the chains that we were advocating for were becoming like barely usable. So by 2021, I was convinced, like, crypto is not going to do what I want it to do in the world if there's not going to be a shitload of chains. Not like a lot, not like 50, like a shitload of them. There's just going to be so many. And so now this issue that we were facing before of like, how are these computers going to talk to each other? That became way, way more important. And the way to do it, it had to be a way where like anyone could just like connect any chain, and it'll just like, let's figure it out. It'll just work. And that's why I became really interested in doing something in this space, and was being more vocal about it, thinking about it more. And one thing leads to another, and start talking to some friends about it. And before you know it, we're starting this thing. And, you know, now that thing is known as Hyperlane.
Okay, well, that makes sense, because you talk about a lot about permissionless, and Hyperlane is permissionless, if I'm not wrong. Can you? Yeah, I'm right. That's awesome, actually, because yeah, a lot of bridges are not permissionless at all. So can you tell us a bit more about Hyperlane, and what can them bring, this permissionless thing?
Of course, that's a great place to start. So what Hyperlane really is, you know, at its core, is we think of it like an open framework for interoperability. So it's like, it's this thing, it's totally open source. It's basically like the protocol and tooling around this protocol for how to connect different blockchains. And like, we wanted to build something that would, again, core insight is like, you want to let anyone connect any chain. And then how do you go from there? So what it is today is this framework that is used to connect, I think as of today, over 110 different chains. It's live with multiple different virtual machines. So it's in production with EVM chains, with Cosmos chains that run CosmWasm, with Solana and other SVM-based chains. That's like a trend that's really kicking off, and Hyperlane's playing a big role of, like there's not that many SVM chains today, but near 100% of the ones that are live are using Hyperlane as their, like primary solution.
Okay.
And so, so that's what it is. And because of this, structure, basically everything about it's open source, everything's available to anyone, because it also introduced what we call like the modular security architecture that now is becoming like more common. It started with us. Now Layer 0 has what they call their DVNs.
Oh, yeah.
I understand that like a few other protocols are working on similar things. Basically, we were the first to say, hey, you want a product, and that product is like an interface, a way to send information or assets between chains. And then, well, it's very important that that product be like secure. And what everyone was thinking about, because they were so concerned about the security, they put those things together, like very, very tightly coupled. Until like Hyperlane came around, no one thought like, wait a second, these things can be separate. They don't have to be tightly coupled. And so by separating them, we keep on one hand, like, hey, here's your product of like, you want to go ahead, you want to connect these chains, you want to have this easy interface. And on the other side, you just want to allow anything that like you consider to be like, some good form of verification. You want to let that be the thing that secures your connection. And, that basic design kind of took us to where we are today, which is, one of the 3 largest, interoperability protocols, kind of whether you look at like messaging volume or like overall activity. It's been quite a ride.
Okay. Yeah, because you're an AVS, so you use Eigenlayer security, but you also have your proper node, if I'm not wrong.
Sort of. So yeah, if you want, we can actually dive into that. Cover some other topics. I'm sure at some point we'll get to the AVS and like how that comes into the mix.
It's important. Yeah, how does that work? How you use Eigenlayer security? And I think every chain or maybe every client can choose. As you said, securities are used, right?
Yeah, and because what we're finding is like the type of security that you really need kind of depends on where you are and the level of maturity and kind of like the growth that you're seeing. And so the way I like to think about it is, so at some point today, I'm going to have to go to my bank and I'm going to have to get some cash out. Now, normally, if I need something like, I don't know, $100, $200, I don't even talk to a banker, right? They just tell me, hey, go use the machine, go use the ATM. And all I need to do there is I put in my PIN code and it'll let me take up to a certain amount. I forget like what my ATM limit is. If I wanted to take out like 5, 10 grand, right? Like a much larger amount, I'm going to have to talk to a banker. And when I do that, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to have me put in my PIN. Then they're going to ask to see my ID. Then they're going to ask me like a series of questions just to kind of like beyond the PIN, beyond the ID, to verify that I am the account owner. They're going to ask me things like, hey, there is a frequent deposit here, probably from your job. What is the name of that depositor? What's the address on your account? What's the old address on your account? What's the phone number associated with your account? Then they're gonna maybe like send me a text message to that phone number to see that like I actually have that phone number. And if I try to do that, so like if there's multiple levels of action types, if the first one is like lowest level, call it transaction up to like $1,000, then the next is between 1,000 and like call it 100,000. The most intense action, the highest level is like, I want to close my account. If you go to your bank and you're like, I want to close my account and I want to take everything out, and you have more than like 10, 15 grand in, you're not getting out of there today. They are going to like, they're going to make you go through quite a process. So what's the bank doing? The bank is like thinking about the context of my action, and it's escalating the security protocol on the basis of that context. And in crypto, we rarely do that, right? Like a transaction. So like, okay, Ethereum has, billions of dollars in economic security through all the amounts staked with the validators. And whether you and I move like 10 cents or $10,000 or $10 million or $1 billion, we get the same experience. We get the same thing.
That's
And
true.
within the context of the same chain, right? Like there's no reason, there's no real cost saving to doing it any different.
Mhm.
But okay, you're thinking about it now. You just launch your chain tomorrow. Well, before you have any users, do you really want to go ahead and try and get like $1 billion of economic security? There's no users. The most important thing is go out and get those users.
Mhm.
So the Hyperlane construction basically lets you, first change and improve your security through time as you mature, and after that even still lets you like reason about what a user does, and then think of which security kind of setting you want to expose them to. Maybe right, like people doing something very severe, right, moving a very large sum of money. Maybe then you want to subject them to like a slower verification, like have a chance for for it to be reviewed more, sort of like what you see in the optimistic bridges, like when you withdraw
Mhm.
OP or from Arbitrum. If they're doing something like really standard, maybe just a handful of validators saying this looks okay, maybe that's just more than enough.
Mhm.
And so where does the AVS come into play with something like Hyperlane? Well, with Hyperlane, anything that provides, I guess there's two classes. There's one thing you would call like a state attestation, and another you could call a state proof. Because really all that like cross-chain infra is really about is you need to find a way to let a contract on chain, on like chain X know what happened on
Mhm.
chain Y. And
Yeah.
so we need either a state attestation, someone saying this is what happened and you should trust me for whatever reason. Maybe that reason is because like I'm putting a lot of money on the line, like in the case of economic security. Maybe that
Mhm.
reason is I just putting my business reputation on the line, right? Like, if say Coinbase was your main validator, like, is Coinbase really going to try and like steal your money? They're going to put $100 billion company at risk to steal like someone's money on chain? Like, probably not. Probably not.
Mhm.
Um,
True.
and so we want to add the AVS as another one of these security measures, and it falls in the category more of a state attestation, right? You have like operators observing the state on the chain that's connected and
Mhm.
attaching economic security to it, right? Putting like real dollars on the line. And so
Mhm.
what we hope to do with the AVS through Eigenlayer, with like what Symbiotic calls a network, similar kind of construction to an AVS, is allow chains that want to have Hyperlane on them to now go beyond just like a reputational based like validator committee to now attaching real dollars, real economic security to it to deter bad behavior.
Yeah.
And so that's where that comes in.
Okay. So it's really a network in the middle of two blockchains, a lot of blockchains. But what's the level of, because as a user I'm always worrying about using a bridge. There's so much hacking going on, but it seems like Hyperlane is decentralized. It's not like some bridges that have an account here, an account there, and that's the message. So what's the level of security and custody on Hyperlane?
Very good question. So the honest answer is that it varies because of this construction.
Yeah.
Someone who uses Hyperlane, so like we've made it totally permissionless, anyone can use it. Like you can put it on your chain or someone else's chain right now, and you can do that in a way that is completely unsecure, meaning like you could basically do it and then you could like set up a validator that's just basically like your laptop and no one else. And if people are like fine with that, that's like their prerogative.
Okay.
Of course, that's not recommended. And so in practice, what materializes is that like we don't recommend and we don't like, it's as the core team, when someone kind of wants our help, and we are very happy to, free of any charge, offer our help in getting Hyperlane onto your chain and getting it live and operational and connected with many, many other chains. What we do there is a validator committee that usually involves the chain team, us in the core team, and one of several like highly reputable validators. So think of folks like Staked, which is owned by Kraken, people like Coinbase Cloud, Figment, Blockdaemon, Everstake, DSRV, folks like that, who it's their business to basically do this and do this well and be very performant. There's a crowd of 40 plus different validators that we work with and kind of pull them in. And so that's one layer of security. Then for the applications that use us, so like one of the largest, liquid restaking tokens in Renzo uses Hyperlane for their assets. And what they do, their construction is one that I really, really like. On top of the Hyperlane default security settings, they run their own security module where they're a part of it. And so whenever you're transferring one of their assets through Hyperlane, they sign off on it. So like there's no situation ever where you're able to transfer their asset without them being involved. And if they wanted to, they could even do it in a way where it's only them. It doesn't touch any of the Hyperlane the existing Hyperlane security modules. And that I think is something very cool. Like right now, Hyperlane is the only player in the interoperability space that lets people really completely own their security in a way where you're using Hyperlane code, but you never have to trust anyone but yourself or people that you are already comfortable working with, trusting with. And so that's on the security side. Now on the custody side, we try to not own any of the contracts. So these were built basically because we build this from the mindset of let anyone connect any chain and let anyone use this permissionlessly. Well, it can't be something that is just designed to be owned by the core team. Of course not. So it's designed to be owned by the people who use it, right? Like the teams that are integrating. And so technically what can happen is either those teams can kind of relinquish ownership and just kind of burn the owner key, in which case, the contract will custody it, but no formal owner, or they can maintain that ownership. And then the contract custodies it, but they are the owners of the contract. But the Hyperlane team never takes anything into its own custody at any point. And that's a really, really cool design. And I think that helps people feel much more comfortable with the system.
Okay, awesome. And I think a lot of people don't understand how bridge works, and maybe yours. So can you just explain quite simply the life cycle of a transaction?
Yeah, of course. So from its origination, right? You're a user, you want to do something. And let's say that something is actually, let's use the case of Renzo, because I brought them up. So this is a good live example that we can use. So Renzo integrated Hyperlane, meaning that their assets are running through Hyperlane when they need to move between chains. So you as a user, you go to the Renzo interface to move some of their ETH derivative, call it from Ethereum to Base. What happens then is you sign that transaction, and in the background, your key is interacting with the Renzo contract, which interacts with the Hyperlane mailbox. The mailbox is our main contract. It's our main developer touch point on every chain. Think of it just like some API that sends and receives things between chains. As it hits that mailbox, now is the turn for the security module to come into place. So in the case of Renzo, like we said before, they're augmenting the default security with their own. So there are two kind of groups of validator-like, pieces of software that are looking at that mailbox, and they're seeing, oh, okay, Joe is trying to send something from here on Ethereum, and it's trying to go to Base. Everything about this transaction looks pretty kosher. Everything looks okay. So I'm going to sign off on it. So they sign, they basically commit that state at the station to say, okay, this transaction is valid. Now we are nearly done with what so we're basically done with what happens on Ethereum. At this point, in between Base and Ethereum, really, but in between every chain that is connected by Hyperlane, there sits what we call a relayer. A relayer in our case, like, is a really, really basic thing. If the mailbox is the thing that sends and receives, the relayer is kind of like the mailman, the mail truck. It looks at the mailbox and it sees, okay, Joe sent that message. I see it in there. Oh, I also see that the security modules say that this one's all right. So I see their signatures. I can go and take those signatures. So I take Joe's message, and now I need to deliver it to the mailbox on base. So I'm the relayer. I take it to the mailbox on base. What I'm functionally doing there, I submit a transaction on your behalf as the user, and that transaction is going to go through the mailbox to eventually hit the address that you told me you want this to arrive at. So just like if you send a letter, you say, okay, here's my home address, and here's the address I'm sending it to. The relayer tells the mailbox, like, hey, Joe's trying to get to this address here on base. Make sure that he gets there. And cool, the mailbox sees that, and it's like, all right, this looks fine, but first I need to make sure that this is secure. So it checks, and the relayer says, oh, okay, well, here are those signatures, right? I collected those signatures before. Here you are. In this case, because we are going through two security modules, we're going to verify two sets of signatures. And only if both of them check out, we can get to our destination. So of course, all the signatures look good. So we just move on to our destination. And so really, like, in this transaction, there are three main components of Hyperlane. There is the mailbox, there's the security module, and then there's the relay. Only the security module is like involved with the security of your message. The relayer, just a dumb mailbox, just a dumb like mail bot. And if you try to kind of like think of the signatures as kind of being like a seal on the letter, like the relayer tried to change what's the mail that you're sending, it would break. It would be very obvious. Then those signatures wouldn't look valid. The message would not be processable. What does that mean? It just means that like you as a user kind of see like a revert or see like a delivery failure. So the relayer cannot really meddle with the contents. It's just purely delivering. And that's about it. And because of like this fairly simplistic architecture, you get like a few nice benefits. First, the relayer takes care of the gas fees for you, right? Because like we know on the other blockchain, like unless it has to get paid the gas to make that transaction work. So you pay the relayer on ETH in Ether, and then it takes care of the base ETH for you. So you kind of like prepay for it, because otherwise it would be such a pain in the ass. Like, when you like try to withdraw for say something like Optimism, and you do it like through the rollup bridge, you have to do multiple transactions. That's because once the message kind of arrives on the destination side, so like someone needs to go ahead and pay that gas. So like the Hyperlane relayer takes care of that for you. So that's a nice benefit. That's the basic of how it works. Now in practice, one relayer can cover a ton of chains. So like lots of people that are, there's, I don't know, six, 7 chains now that like operate Hyperlane themselves. So they run relayers for their chain, for all the other chains they want to connect to. Us as the core team, we run relayers for like 90 plus chains. Anyone can run one, but like, it's the same thing as like, well, anyone can like run their own, data center, basically. Anyone can run their own servers, but a lot of people use, either cloud providers, or they like rent a data center from somewhere. And so in practice, like not a lot of people want to run their own relayer. So, we're happy to do it.
Well, so you mean if I don't trust you, I could just bring a relayer myself? But as you said, it's protected by cryptography, so it doesn't make sense anyway. No?
Exactly. Yeah. Like it's, the main reason actually people, will choose to run their own relayer is less about, security, and more about like, in some case, if it's your chain, that could be a nice revenue stream, because it means that now you can start monetizing the in and out, bridging traffic to your chain. Or, you might I mentioned before, right? Like when the core team does, a lot of the kind of like what we call the service work to get Hyperlane operational, we don't charge anything from the team, right? Like it's pretty well known that a bunch of other interoperability teams like have very high integration fees. We don't believe in that. So basically users pay per use. And so in some cases, you might not want to do that. You might want to, maybe subsidize your users' bridging transactions. And so in that case, you run the relay and basically you don't charge the user for it. You just, fund it yourself.
Okay. Awesome. So, well, yeah, that's perfectly clear. I'm very excited about Superlane with Velodrome.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. I guess, can you tell us a bit about it?
Of course. So this one, I gotta tell you, like, it's really like one of all the things that happened this year. This one is like one of my favorites, and for like maybe non-intuitive reasons. It's just kind of like as one of the people who like created this thing, it just like makes you feel like really proud when something like this happens. So, we got someone connected us with the Velodrome team, I don't know, 6-something months ago. I remember asking them like, hey, what are you thinking about? Like, how can we help? And they were like, honestly, we don't really know what we want to do right now. We're just looking around. We don't speak for a few months. And in those few months, apparently what was happening is the team in Velodrome realized that it's really important to them to have like a unified trust assumption between all the OP chains that they work on. And they were waiting for the native form of, superchain interoperability to go live. And it didn't, in their estimation, they weren't sure when that's going to happen and they didn't want to wait anymore. And so they started digging into Hyperlane and they realized, wait a second. They basically kind of heard what we were talking about earlier in this conversation. Let's wait. I can kind of own every aspect of the security here. And all of this stuff is like, there's great tooling around it. This is just like out of the box, just there. And they started just doing it. They started kind of like, converting their system to run on Hyperlane with, a security module that they like create and operate. And they came to us basically when it was nearly done. And we're just like, hey, we have a couple of questions. We're like, we did all this stuff. We just want to make sure. And it's like, whoa, you did all this stuff by yourself? That's so fucking cool. And so the main reason why I'm like so excited about it is they basically kind of like found this stuff mostly on their own, reached the conclusions of everything you can do with it and correctly, almost all on their own, and got basically to the finish line all on their own. And so what's Superlane today is it's a security module that's replicated on a number of OP chains. It was mostly initiated by the Velodrome team with some help from us. They basically got a consistent validator committee that is replicated across all of those chains. So it's the same people that you're trusting. They went even above and beyond. And they have specific incentives for those validators to make sure that they stay in line. And right now, they use it for transfers of their own asset and their token voting. And in 2025, they're going to use it to secure their cross-chain swaps. So obviously, there's multiple versions of Velodrome on different chains, and right now those don't interact with each other beyond like governance in in voting. But they thought, hey, wait a second, like, wouldn't it be really cool if someone on Mode could take advantage of like the liquidity pool that's on OP? Because for specific assets, that's probably like a much more competitive pricing. And so that's going to run through Hyperlane, secured by Superlane. And when OP delivers like the native form, this is perhaps the cool part about it. There will just be a secure, Hyperlane security module that wraps the native form of interoperability. So they don't even need to rip out anything of their integration. It's not like they just spent all this time and it goes in the trash. They just go from, okay, we were using this module here, Superlane. Now we're going to use this module over there, the native form.
Okay, makes sense. But from a user perspective, how is it different from Uniswap, where you have all the chain and you can swap every token?
Oh, so it from the user perspective, you won't even notice that it's running on Hyperlane. Everything just like works, kind of similar to how it used to. I'm on the cross-chain swapping. It depends on like how they put it in the interface. So I don't want to speak for them. From the little that I know about it, shouldn't change much. Maybe there'll be like more of a chain indicator kind of thing, just so that you know that like this is going to get filled using liquidity from somewhere else. But yeah, your user experience is likely to remain almost completely unchanged. And that's, again, one of the other cool things about it is like, Velodrome works really, really well. And like Aerodrome works incredibly well. And those guys, I'll tell you, we work with a lot of teams. I was actually just telling them this, we had chatted earlier this morning, and I was telling them, you guys are one of the easiest, best teams in the industry. Like there's not a lot of teams that are such a pleasure to work with because they are so good, so professional. And so they've done a remarkable job, right? And so clearly what they're doing is working. So the last thing you want to do is like, change what their user experience is like.
Okay, I understand. Do you think it's going to help stop the liquidity fragmentation on most of the layer 2?
I think so. Like one thing I'll tell you is, I get asked all the time, like, do you have any hot takes? What hot takes can you share? And I was like, look, yeah, I have my takes, but like if there's one I'm like, I'm sure people will tell me I'm wrong about, but I am not wrong about, the same way that I wasn't wrong to bet on there being like a shitload of chains. Because everyone thought 2 years ago when I was like, we are going to focus Hyperlane on this thing, everyone, including my own team, thought it was nuts, thought it was the dumbest idea. But it's not the dumbest idea. The thing that I feel that way today is like this whole fragmentation discourse, it is not going to be relevant this time next year. Basically, give us 12 months from today. I would be shocked if people are as worried about fragmentation as they are right now. Because in the last 12 months, basically all the tools were put in place for this to not be a worry anymore. But it takes some time. There's a lag between when the tools are created and when they're really put into work at scale. And now we're like, 25% of the way to like those tools being put to work at scale. But I feel like give it another 12 months based on everything that we're seeing, that kind of pace, it's really not going to feel like a big deal. I think people basically like the people who in December 2025 are like talking about fragmentation being a big problem, they're going to be like, people are going to make fun of them. They're going to be like, you're just concern trolling. This is like not a serious thing anymore. So I very much feel like that's exactly where we're headed.
Yeah, that's totally my take also. I think, I think you also intense messaging and intent, of course. A lot of people doesn't already understand what is intense. Can you explain how can it be used?
I'll say first, I hate that we use that term because it's like so nebulous, so confusing. And like to me, it feels like, kind of like an academic term that, once again, an academic term, like really penetrated just how we speak in crypto. And I wish we just speak like a little bit more, normally.
Yeah.
Because like, everything someone does is an intent. Like I intended to do this podcast with you today, and I was very, excited to like speak with you. I intended to make some coffee, and I did make some coffee, and it's came out great, and it's really helping me because I didn't sleep last night. But in the context of like, okay, what are crypto intents? Really, what they're meaning is like, I want to go from this place to that place, and I want to start with this asset and either end up with the same asset at some price, or like maybe I want to end up with a different asset. So I want to basically like, I have a thing I want to do. It usually involves either moving an asset from one place to another, or moving an asset to another place and then ending up with another asset. And I don't care about how that happens in between. That's all I want to like. I just want to go from here to there. And sometimes in the middle, I want to end up with a different asset. Make it work for me. And in the world of cross-chain infra, there's been for a long time like this topic of, oh well, these two things are separate. They're like oil and water, and like messaging based bridging is here and intent based bridging is here, and like I just disagree with that. And we realized that like actually messaging systems can be very, very useful for people who want to provide intent based services. And so the way that we see this interplaying is like, whether you're doing it, either intents or messaging, at a certain point, you will have a need to rebalance. So like, let's say we start off and we want to let you move between Arbitrum and base. And so we have like 100 USDC on both sides. And now you want to go, right? Like you want to go from Arbitrum to base, and you want to move, call it like 50 USDC. So you're going to put in 50 USDC on the Arbitrum side, and you're going to take out 50 USDC on the base side. All right. That seems pretty cool. Like if now I come in and I go, the other way, I go from base back to Arbitrum and I put in 50, well, we're back to 100 and 100. All is dandy. But if instead I went the same way as you, now we got a problem. Now we have 0 on one side and 200 on the other side. And so regardless of whether you use the messaging or intent approach, you have a need to rebalance. And what does rebalance really mean? It's just like, okay, I need to move some back, like not as a user, but as part of the system. And for that purpose, the settlement rail is quite useful, like becomes really important, becomes really relevant. And at the core, well, I don't know if everyone would agree with this, but I think that's certainly an opinion that I hold and a view that I hold, that messaging systems like Hyperlane, especially ones like Hyperlane where you've modularized the like security element, they really are like different settlement rails. And so this is where like there could be like a very happy and productive marriage between intents and messaging. Because what makes it difficult to offer intent-based bridging on, again, excuse my language, I've used this term a number of times on our conversation, a shitload of chains.
No problem.
Like, let's say you're a liquidity provider for an intense solution and you have like $1 million of inventory. Well, if when you're covering 10 chains, you're like, okay, that's manageable. What if now you want to cover 100 chains? And what if next year you want to cover 500 chains? Because like I very much expect that by this time next year, Hyperlane will be on 500 chains. And last year when I was telling people like, oh, well, I expect that it'll be on more than 100, they're like, whoa, that seems outlandish. And we're like, all right, now it's on 15, not that outlandish. So spreading that inventory becomes a little bit of a hassle, especially if the only way to get access to that inventory is by a 7-day delay because of the roll-up bridge.
Yeah.
And so if the messaging system can offer you, you trade 7 days for 30 seconds, well, now your life as like an intense player just become way easier, and you can make $1 million go way, 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 way longer, right? So people like talking about capital efficiency. Well, capital efficiency is very important as you think of like inventory management. And now if we reduce the like if the settlement system, because it can move much faster, reduced your inventory turnaround time from, again, 7 days to 30 seconds, that's a massive difference.
Yeah.
So I think this is where the marriage of these systems will happen primarily. This is something that we are very much working on to basically make it much easier for anyone to build it. Like a lot of people are building something where their expertise is more like, how do we facilitate low cost? How do we make it easy to provide liquidity? How to make it easy to be like a solver? and then they have to like now start thinking about all the cross-chain part. That is so fucking hard, right? Like we spent 3 years doing this. Like, trust me, you do not want to go ahead and build a system that can easily connect and scale to connect a ton of chains. It fucking sucks. It like, I know, like I did it. It is, I highly don't recommend it. You know, it's miserable work. It's painstaking work, and it's not glamorous work, right? Like, you know, everyone looks at something like Eigenlayer, they're like, oh, look at those gigabrain geniuses. Like, okay, cool, yeah, they're smart people. I'd argue that like restaking is a far simpler, you know, undertaking than like meanwhile, there's almost nobody who is like, wow, look at like what layer 0 or Hyperlane's doing. Like, you know, they're so smart for being able to figure where like the engineering problem of doing what layer 0 and Hyperlane's doing, I would say is like 2 orders of magnitude more complex and more difficult. You know, like this is, yeah, like no one thinks of this as like this is crypto's version of going to Mars, but this is crypto's version of going to Mars. This is like, I think from an engineering perspective, the absolute hardest thing that you can be doing. And now basically, okay, you're going to be, you know, you think that like cross-chain intents are the way to solve like the liquidity problem. Okay, so now we're asking you to do 2 super hard things. We're asking you both to figure out how to like, you know, solve energy problems and how to figure out how to go to Mars. That's a lot. Well, we figured out the go to Mars part. So like, just find one hard problem. We'll do the rest for you. So that's kind of how I think of these 2 things combining. And, you know, I totally understand why a lot of people disagree with me and why they think that it's an either or thing. But until I'm proven wrong, I will continue to believe that it's very much a together and not an either or kind of thing.
Okay, that's very interesting. But how does that work on Hyperlane? Do you have like what it's called searcher, I think, like native, or do you work with another network?
No, so basically, like the goal is to create the interface that makes it easier for those searchers, easier for those, basically like separate the cross-chain connectivity part from the like, hey, I just know how to move liquidity around and I have access to it, and I know how to like execute orders really efficiently, so that the people who know how to do all that come here and benefit from all the cross-chain infra, so that their operational you know, overhead becomes like way lower, and they don't have to like spin their wheels trying to figure out how to do this at scale.
Okay, I understand. And yeah, I've seen a lot of what you call expansion. That makes sense because you talk a lot about 1,000 chains, a shitload of chain. So that's kind of your mantra. What is the North Star? How do you see Hyperlane in 5 years?
How to see it in 5 years is
that's
well, okay. I think my team's gonna hate that I am sharing this with you, because like I've been kind of like, you know, batting this around for a little bit, and I haven't, you know, spoken about it much of anywhere publicly. But so I thinking back to earlier the part of the conversation, like I told you, I got really interested in this whole thing, this whole crypto thing, because I wanted to play a role in reinventing how we move money around, how the system works. And I think about it like, okay, so if you wanted to kind of like if you wanted to create something like Visa in 2025, how would you do it? Well, if you wanted to like build, you know, a Visa of the future, a Visa 2.0, so to speak, and you did that in 2025, well, it would probably involve blockchains. It would probably involve stable coins, and it would most certainly involve a way to connect all of those blockchains. And so when I think of kind of like the 5-year, you know, like call it the end game step 1, right? Because something like Hyperlane, I do think of like could be like a multi-decade thing, but there are like multiple phases. So the end game of phase 1 probably looks like setting the foundation for something like, you know, a Visa of the future, right? Like a Visa of crypto. If you have a seamless way to connect between all of these chains, every chain kind of looks like a single or a cluster of merchants. And you know, blockchains, why are they really special? Not just because like they're permissionless computers. They're because they're permissionless computers that let you very easily move value digitally and have like very great assurances while you do that. And so you connect that bit, then you connect like the elimination of fragmentation, whether it's through like messaging based bridges or like the combination of intents and messaging based bridging. Hyperlane has a real chance to just make it completely seamless to get from anywhere in crypto to anywhere else in crypto, and then even outside of crypto. So that's kind of what I think of like where I wanted to go. That's what the end game for the expansion is, that it just so easy. Basically, like right now, no one ever thinks about where their card will be accepted. No one ever thinks like, okay, well, I have a Visa card, I have a MasterCard. Anywhere I want to pay, it'll just work. It'll just work.
Yeah.
What's happening in the background? These things basically like interoperable networks, to me, everyone likes thinking of them as TCP IP, and like I totally understand that. I think that's a fine analogy to make. I think of it much more as like a payment network or a card network. And again, that's where like that idea of settlement rails comes through. Like, what does Visa really do? It basically like just assures that you can make that transaction and that you're the right person. And like that's why, well, what's the thing that someone like Visa is most concerned with? Fraud and chargebacks. So it all comes down to like making sure that the right transaction is happening at the right place, and that the person who is making the transaction actually has like enough credit to make that. They're not in the business of like extending that credit. They're not a bank. And so similar, I think like, okay, this is what Hyperlane could become, and this is what we want it to become. And step by step connect those chains, step by step make it easier to navigate through those connections, make it more efficient, make it more feasible, more seamless. And it just becomes like, if crypto gets as big as we all think it could be, these will basically be the payment networks of the future.
Okay. If I could just play the devil advocate.
Please.
Yeah, I can. I'm really looking into solving fragmentation on layer 2. There is a lot of solution, aggregation of proof or this kind of thing. Do you think Hyperlane could play a role in this world where there is no fragmentation of layer 2? It could outside, but I mean,
great question. So are you saying could it play a role basically like if it got solved, let's say on all in one chain, and like there's not a proliferation of chains?
Like all L2 share the same liquidity because of proof aggregation or Eigenlayer or whatever,
So I think all of those solutions, and trust me, we are intimate with all of them. They all know that it doesn't work without like a messaging system. And so think of like the proof aggregation or so actually proof aggregation like is somewhat viable, but like really what all blockchains are, this is when I was at Galaxy, my partner there, and I just recently saw him for lunch and was reminded of just like what a unique and amazing guy he is. Really one of the smartest people I've ever met my entire life. And he told me something a few years ago that like really stuck with me. And he's like, really all these blockchains they're just kind of like clocks. And if you want them to be able to communicate better with each other, they need to be on the same times. They need to like run the exact same clock. And so proof aggregation, where it starts like, having its issues is if you're not running on the same clock. So if my block time and your block time are not synchronizing. And so part of the pitch of the many chain world is you want to do something different on your chain. You want to have it run with its own rules. You want to like change how it operates from like, you might want to have fast block time. Someone else might have slower block times. You want to have like, different block sizes or however you want to do it. And so the proof aggregation systems are going to like run into some issues there. And so they could have like clusters for the same type of clock. So I think even so long, like if you can get everything on like one proof aggregation system, then something like Hyperlane becomes less useful, right? I just don't see how, right? Like I've been living in this world, I'm almost 35. People have different tastes and different preferences, and just like, if nothing else, cultural lines and geography lines are going to lead us to draw different conclusions and do things like a little bit differently. And because of that, I view Hyperlane as like always having a role. But if that was not the case, it probably doesn't have a big role. And like, you got to make those kind of bets, you know?
Yeah.
I tell our team all the time, and I've been telling them this since we started, like, we are not building, something for a world where crypto doesn't get any bigger than it's today. We're building something that I view as crypto can't grow to the size that I think it will grow without something like this. I think it has to look a lot like what Hyperlane looks like. It doesn't mean that it will be Hyperlane, but why not? Why not? Right? Like, we just have to make it happen. But it'll definitely look something like Hyperlane. In the world where crypto gets smaller, we pack up, we go home. We just pack up and we go home. We don't, gotta make big bets.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks. That's very interesting. I learned a lot of things, actually.
That was a phenomenal question, by the way. A lot of people ask like a much less interesting version of that question, but that was like the best way to ask it.
Thanks, man. To get back to Hyperlane, what's the roadmap for next year, 25?
All right. Well, so what can I share from that roadmap? More virtual machines, and that is, in some ways, thanks to our team, but in much more ways, thanks to how we built Hyperlane and the amazing work of other teams. So because everything about it is open source, because we put together a guide on like, hey, here's how you'd build Hyperlane for any VM. Here's like how to do it. Here's the pieces that you need. A lot of other teams have begun implementing Hyperlane for their own VM. So Hyperlane is pretty close to going into production. Just came out of audit for Starknet, pretty close to going into production. That was completely done by the Pragma and Paradex teams, who are like big Starknet teams. Similarly for Move, similarly for Ton, similarly for Fuel, similarly for Cadena and Roots. I guess Rootstock's already live. Similarly for Cadena. And so all of those are going to hit in 2025. So that's exciting. Something very tangible, as I was speaking to you on the intent front, that's going to hit in 2025, and I'm quite excited about that. And there's a economic security. It's going to be live in 2025. So I'm quite looking forward to that. And some other like I was going to say innovations, but I was like, well, if it's other people's innovation and you're just like working with them to bring it to Hyperlane, can you really say that it's innovation? It's like, it's their innovation. They deserve the credit. We just like, did some of the work. So that should be happening as well. And those are the big things for sure. That like, that I feel like, okay, I could definitely mention.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I talk a lot. I ask my community what questions they could have.
What do they want to know?
I think you know.
So
yeah,
based on what you're saying, I think here's what I think. I think they're asking about what's the word? What do they call those? The tokens.
Yeah, exactly. TGE.
So what can I tell you? I can tell you that the foundation is like hard at work at it. They have a bunch, there's a bunch of engineers, putting their heads to it. The design that they have is really, really unique. Like, this is not like going to be some, random ass ERC20 that doesn't do anything.
Awesome.
And so it takes time to build. It will, as far as I know from their plans, I'd be shocked if it doesn't happen in 2025. It's a question of question of when. And, I know that they want to do it basically as soon as possible. So I think the kind of people are like working around the clock to do that. But good things take time to build.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Well, that's almost an hour. Is there something I didn't talk about you want to mention?
Oof, no, you were very comprehensive. You're good. This was a fun pod.
Awesome, man.
I'll come back anytime you want. This was fun.
Really? Okay. Just one more question, because usually we always ask if you have some advice for a young investor or just someone that want to learn about crypto. outside of Hyperlane, just personal stuff?
If you just want to learn about crypto, I would say, like, you know what? I was gonna recommend some of the stuff that I did, and then I realized, like, fucking, it's a different world. Like, you probably tried to follow the track that a lot of us followed in like 2016 and 2017. You're just as likely to end up like down really bad rabbit holes, because there's just like so much more stuff. Like, you're, as much as you're likely to like learn about something really cool like Ethereum or Solana, you're just as likely to like learn about Richard Hart's like hex thing. It feels so easy.
Yeah.
I guess start with trying to learn about things like Ethereum and Solana, things that are real, things that are like just have real innovation around them, and just openly ask questions and participate. And like, if you really like get your heart set on it, like, this is the most open industry in the world. Like, I just hopped on, 2 hours ago, I was on a call. Some guy DM'd me. He's like, "Hey, I'm thinking of building this thing with Hyperlane. Like, I want to get your thoughts on it." And I was like, "Okay, honestly, I'm super busy, but like in a week and a half, it looks like I kind of don't have anything in these 2 hours. And you seem like a nice kid, so like, let's do this." And like, I never met him before. Just sweet kid, just building some, like, honestly, I won't even say it because it's actually very relevant to what we were talking about today. And using Hyperlane to do that. And like, there's not that many industries where you can do that, but like in crypto, that shit just works. We are really like open people, and we're all excited about what we're building. And so if you put in the effort, right, like, as a random person just like asking for a handout, not gonna help. But like, demonstrate that you're really into crypto, that you're doing the work. So if you're an engineer, start building stuff, start making open source contributions. If you're more like there's an intellectual type, you want to do research, you want to get smart, or you want to become an investor, start writing analysis, start writing research, publish it. Even if no one fucking reads it, just show that you have it. And then when you ask people to do stuff with you, or to like give you the time of day, if you can point them to the effort that you put in, they'll be like, that person's for real. I'm going to take this seriously. And I'm now going on like 7-8 years in crypto, and I can't tell you how many times when someone demonstrated that they really care by putting in the work, like they could show that they've done the work. I always gave them the time of day. I can't do that every time it leads to something, but like some of those kids, I didn't have a job for them then. I just connected them with a buddy. 3-4 years later, they're still working. Still working in crypto. And it's like, so just don't be shy. Take your chances, but do the work. Do the work.
Yeah.
Don't expect any handouts.
Awesome. That's a perfect advice, I think. Well, that's a good way to finish. Thanks a lot, Jon. That was really, really nice. Really interesting.
Thanks,
and really fun.
This was, I was like feeling, it's funny, this morning I was feeling really sick, and I was like, maybe I was like, no, this will be fun. Let's do it. I don't. So I'm glad we did it.
Awesome. Well, have a good day. Thanks. Maybe see you another day. Yeah.
Please.
That would be awesome.
Thank you so much.
Okay. See you. Thanks.